Breakfast of Champions was in turnaround and was characterized as one of those unfilmable novels. How did you get the assignment and how did you approach the adaptation to make it filmable?
I was a young guy, just turned 30, maybe, about in the mid 70s. We had finished Nashville, and Altman, somebody must have brought it to him, producer, or maybe picked it up on his own. And he had some people writing, teams of writers, and he couldn't crack it. No one could crack it. And one day between puffs, he just turned to me and said, "Have you read this?" I said, "No." He said, "Read it and get back to me." So I read it. It was sort of like rock and roll or acid. There's before Breakfast of Champions and after Breakfast of Champions. And I said, "My goodness, this is the way I think, sort of."
Interesting.
And he said, "How quickly can you write a screenplay?" I said, "Well, I don't know how to type, but I'll go fast." And I said, "What am I supposed to do with it?" And he said, "Just do what you want to do with it." But the only marching orders from him was, "Don't follow the book." He said, "Do not try and follow the book." So I started to analyze it. I didn't have much time. And I thought, well, because Kurt inserts himself into the fabric of the story, not just as the author, but as himself, under his alias sometimes, you'd have to sort of make it a biography of Vonnegut to really do justice to that premise. I knew Bob didn't want that, and I wasn't capable of it. And so I kind of got into the character. I thought I would just dive into the characters and try and reduce it to their story. And I knew Altman would take care of the rest. So I wrote a screenplay. He liked it. Everybody liked it. And it ultimately didn't get made. It's funny. I'll never forget this. He said, always his first question for any movie, his, mine, anybody's he was involved with. All right, who are we going to put in it? He's always casting it even before a screenplay. I think that's the way he conceived movies, films. And I said, Johnny Carson. What a great idea. And Carson was famous for not wanting anything to do with movies, I think. Yeah. And because it was post Nashville, I think, and there was a lot of noise, I think he kind of almost maybe got tempted, but then passed. And I do believe Peter Falk got involved, but I wasn't on the internet. I just supplied the screenplay and was waiting for the phone to ring, and it didn't. And Bob moved on, and I moved on.
Okay, that's the first act of your participation. Now, I read that you actually bought the film rights to Breakfast of Champions for a short time. What were the circumstances of that decision, and did you work with source author Kurt Vonnegut at all?
David Blocker, a producer I started working with Carolyn Pfeiffer on Choose Me. Blocker and I, when we had any money, we bought the rights for a year or two. Couldn't afford it anymore. Never really thought we were going to get it made, but it was kind of like, yeah, I got Breakfast of Champions,
Yeah.
And but that's an expensive brag, and we went broke on that. And I kind of adjusted the script once or twice. Back in the Altman era, I went to New York to meet Vonnegut. It's a good thing I didn't quite know what I was doing, because if I wrote it on paper at the time, I probably would have fainted to meet. I was working with Bob, but he was an impressive guy on all levels, and worthy of every part of his legend and beyond. And Vonnegut is, did you ever meet him?
No, unfortunately, no. That's like meeting Orson Welles or something. I don't know.
Well, you would think, but he was a very mercurial. He would be
Yeah,
your biggest supporter, your best friend until, and then you didn't know what to expect. And I wasn't. We went to a place, and he's. I was kind of expecting him to just pour out how to
right,
do it,
right.
and he said, a book is one thing, a movie should be entirely separate. Don't follow the book. So I figured that must be the way to go about this.
Yep.
And so I went instinctively on the first pass at it and just had fun and did what I did and dissolve, as they say.
So fast forward to the actual production. How did Bruce Willis get involved?
I got a call in my little isolated cabin then, and it was from Bruce Willis, who I'd worked with in a few years earlier on Mortal Thoughts, he and to me. And Bruce was really vocal at the time of Mortal Thoughts, saying, "This is the most fun and the best I've ever been."
Wow.
Because he said, somebody let me act. Somebody let me invent. Bruce is I feel so badly for his condition.
Yeah.
He and I probably are on opposite ends politically, maybe, but in his soul, he was a true artist.
Yeah.
He's funny, he's literate, he's witty, he's got a big heart. He, I, you wonder where he went off,
Yeah.
but I really enjoyed him, but I hadn't had any contact with him. I mean, he was Bruce Willis, and I just get this call, and he says, "I want to make a comedy. I want to make people laugh. I want to make a comedy right now. I want to make Breakfast of Champions. I found out you wrote the screenplay. How cheaply can we make this movie? Let's go."
Wow.
Now, you don't get those calls that often.
No, you don't.
I said, "Well, who's going to put up the money?" He said, "Don't worry about it. I'll get the money, but you got to tell me how much." So Blocker made a budget. It was the most money I think I've ever had. It was about 8 or 9 maybe at the time.
Okay.
And I had done 5, 6 movies under $1 million, so anything that, but what it buys you is time and location and that extra little thing. And I said, "Well, I wrote a screen." He said, "I read it." He said, "It's good. Let's go." So I think somebody'd have to tell me, but a few months later, we were shooting.
One of the casting coups was Albert Finney in the key role of Kilgore Trout. How did you land him in that role? And did Willis use his star power to help you out?
He said, "Have you got any casting ideas?" I was used to not commercial success by this time. Now, Bruce was only used to commercial success, but I never approached a film by that. I'd been doing it for 20 years by then.
Yeah.
I never rang the bell, commercially. So I knew it wasn't in my DNA. So I didn't care about that side of it at all. I mean, and I knew the script was unorthodox, to be sure. And I love the fact that we wanted to make something really funny and yet dark at the same time. And Kurt's take on it was America in the 70s. History never changes. I mean, the rich are rich and the oppressed are oppressed. But Kurt touched on all the universal truths and punishments at the time. And he used his cartoons, his drawings, instead of explaining things. So I figured that's fair. I'm not going to explain anything. I'm just going to throw it out there. And he said, "Who do you want in it?" And I said, "Well, let's go after the best actor who fits the role for Kilgore. That's where we should start,
Yeah.
because Kilgore is going to be a surrogate for Vonnegut anyway." And he said, "Who's that?" I said, "Albert Finney for me." And he goes,
Wow.
"Oh my God, could we get Albert? Do you think we could get him?" I said, "I have no idea, especially not paying big money." And he was famous for turning everything down, everything, especially in his later years,
Uh-huh.
unless it was some prestige thing. I was surprised when Pam Dixon, the casting director, said, "Albert read it and wants to meet you in London." That's sort of a win-win proposition. I got to
Sure.
go to meet Albert Finney. So appropriately, I met him in a hotel bar, and we just hit it off. And he he just jumped in. I mean, I'm famous for sort of for saying, "Are you going to do this or what?" I mean, right there, first meeting, I said, I don't, and I never did. I don't test people. I don't read people. I don't pass. I said, I go after my first choice and hopefully start working in the first time we shake hands. And we were, by the end of those 3 bottles or so, we were working.
That's
And
awesome.
I come back, call Bruce, said, "I think Albert's going to do the movie if his agent will accept the money." And Bruce, I think he had a tear in his eye. I really
Oh,
honestly do,
yeah.
because he said, "You got Albert Finney to be in our movie?"
So how'd you keep going from there with casting, such as Nick Nolte?
There, and I'd work with Nick, and Nick is as unorthodox as anybody who ever lived, and I love him. And he probably bristled that I sent him the script not for the lead. He said, "Well, how come, Mike?" And I said, "I sent you this script a few years ago when I owned the rights to it, and you never responded." "Well, I thought you'd come after me or something." I said, "Well, I am." I said, "Listen, Harry LeSabre is going to steal this movie, and it's yours if you want it." And then he jumped in, and I called Bruce. I said, "Nick Nolte's what?"
Oh,
And we both had worked with Glenn Headley, and he wanted to work with Barbara Hershey. And suddenly we had the best cast I've ever seen. And
yeah, yeah. Not to mention Owen Wilson in a small
oh,
part, and
well,
yeah.
those were Bruce. That was Bruce,
Ah,
100% Bruce. He'd say, Owen Wilson wants to be in this movie. He's got a day." So
that's
we
awesome.
invented a part for him.
So infamously, the critics piled on and generally gave the film bad reviews. What was your reaction to that unexpected vitriol?
I mean, it was both barrels point blank, and when it came out,
Yeah.
and uh, I was I wanted to peek under the tent. I mean, Vonnegut looked at the corrosive look of America, and it just aligned with a lot of my philosophy that the most important part of any individual, the most precious part and the most fragile part, is your identity,
Yeah.
which is the thing that's under assault constantly. And when we made the movie, it was before internet and before social media, and it was still old Hollywood rules and how to make movies and all of that.
Right.
And after Jaws, it was, "Your movie's no good. It didn't make any money." That's all I ever heard. You couldn't make good movies if they didn't make money, because they're the same thing, aren't they? And and I gave up on all of that and just said, "We'll just make cheap little movies and nobody will see them, but someday, somehow."
So after the film did its screening, did you get a DVD release?
One DVD of it made by the Disney imprint that
Uh,
buried the movie, which was Hollywood Pictures, I think.
right.
And I got my copy at the last day the warehouse record was open before they closed. Found it in the 99-cent bin.
Oh my.
I took it home, put it in the DVD player. I hadn't seen the movie in a long time, and the first part, the first like 20 minutes, are all trailers for movies with big name actors that they dumped. And you couldn't fast forward past it. So you'd see movies with
Right.
Sandra Bullock and Liam Neeson and movies you never heard of. I figured, oh, that's why. And then the movie started. It was ugly color and the wrong format. And I thought, I'm not going to get through this. And I laughed my ass off for the whole movie. And I
So
called a
did I.
friend of mine who didn't work on the movie, but who's got a great sense of humor. And I said, I just watched Breakfast of Champions for the first time in years and years. And certainly since it came out, he said, yeah, what'd you do? I said, I laughed. And I said, if it was someone else's movie, I'd be jealous. and and
Excellent.
and I had no contact with Bruce after that, except we tried to get a movie made years later and we couldn't. But Albert, who I once on the set said, because he'd pull up his chair in the middle of outside, we're shooting in Idaho. He'd pull up his chair, light a cigar, and start reading a book. And everybody kind of gravitated towards Albert Finney because he had that. And this is not an exaggeration, I promise you. He knew every crew member's name. He knew everybody's name. It was as if he had a sign. I said, come on over and talk to me. And people, they just love this man. And he got it. And he called me and left a message. I think I was either under the bed or had dug my own grave at the time. I was just waiting for someone with a shovel. But he left a message and said, well, they didn't like it. What do we care? We made something really good.
So let's get back to your source. Did you ever get the movie in front of Robert Altman?
We had no screenings of it when it came out. And I had my only screening of the film. I was at a complex that they rented places and had a restaurant and screening rooms, and Altman was there. And he said, you can use my editing room. And in this complex that he was one of several tenants of, there was a very nice plush 20-seat screening room. So Susie Elmiger and I, the editor, we had finished whatever we had to do in LA, and I went into Bob's office. It was in the afternoon. I said, we're going to get together a screening tonight, first time. He said, what time? I said, early, like 5, 6 o'clock. He said, who's coming? I said, you and whoever else we can get together in a few hours' notice. He said, okay, but I got something at like 8:15. I'm going to have to run out afterwards. Don't take it as a sign of anything. I said, okay. So we got, Nick came.
Nice.
And the cameraman was there, and a director, very famous young at the time director, who was casting his next film, and he wanted to see some actor, and sorted other people who were in the room at the time or something. Picture starts, picture's over. Everybody's a little stunned. Nick really liked it.
Oh yeah.
The director ultimately hired the actor. He came, so he.
All right. So.
But Bob gets out of his seat, starts out of the room, and he was one of those guys that I don't care who you were with. All eyes were always on Altman, whatever he was doing, and he didn't ask for it. He just wasn't. And he leaves quickly, and he says, "Come here. I got to tell you something." I thought, oh my God, I can handle this now. And he was in a little entryway, putting on a coat and a tie while we were talking, and he said, he grabbed me. He never did this before, and he looked at me with those X-ray blues of his, and he said, "You've done something great, and they're going to kill you for it. It was the best thing anybody could have said to me, because I knew he really, really appreciated it. And I knew he was right. They were going to kill me for it. And they did. And if I had a career, it was a career killer. But as my dear friend Tom Robbins, the writer, always said, you don't have a career, you have a careen. It was just another.
Robin-esque. Finally, what's your perspective on the new DVD release of Breakfast of Champions from Shout Factory? And what do you feel about the opinion that it was ahead of its time?
Now we're Act 3. We're Act 3.
Yeah.
And if you ask me, okay, you made this movie in 1998. Right. People thought it was too outrageous and everything.
Right.
And it's the way I looked at America, and it was not Vonnegut's necessarily, but it was a continuation of, I think, Vonnegut's, if not his tone, his attitude.
Sure.
And free will and chaos. And if you ask me, okay, pick a time to release this movie. It's never been seen by anybody before. Right. Pick a time. I would pick when they're going to, Ron Mann and his Films We Like is going to revive it at the New York Lower Manhattan Alamo Draft House, where you can drink and eat, I've been told, and recline.
Yes, it's beautiful.
2 or 3 days before the 2024 election. Now, if you ask me anything, I'd say then, right now. And given what we've endured, I would have to say this will look like a tame documentary to the latest headlines or clips that people are going to be assaulted with. Yeah. And it was too much for everybody at the time. Now it might not even be enough.
Good point. This is Patrick McDonald for HollywoodChicago.com. Copyright 2025.